27% of Americans have $0 saved. Here's exactly what changes at 1,000. Picture this. It's almost midnight, and you're lying in bed, and your phone buzzes with a check engine light notification, and your stomach just drops. Not because you don't know what a check engine light means. Because you know exactly what it means. It means a bill you don't have room for. It means moving money you don't have between accounts you wish had more in them. It means doing that quiet math in your head, rent, groceries, minimum payment, and coming up short before you even know the actual number. You lie there running scenarios. Can I put it off a week? Can I ask for an extension? Which card has room left on it? That's not really about the car. That's about money, and about how much of your mental space it's quietly taking up without you even realizing it. Here's the thing almost nobody tells you honestly. Most people are one car repair away from that exact spiral. And the mainstream advice, just save 3 to 6 months of expenses, treats saving like it's one giant, flat goal. Like you're either a saver or you're not, like there's a finish line and until you cross it, none of your progress counts. But that's not how it actually works. And it's not how it feels either. Because the truth is, your life doesn't change gradually as your savings grow. It changes in jumps. At specific numbers, specific thresholds, where something that used to be a crisis quietly stops being one. Today we're walking through 5 of those numbers, 1,000, 5,000, 10,000, 50,000, and $100,000, and what genuinely shifts in your day-to-day life, your stress levels, and your options at each one. And I'll tell you right now, the milestone that changes the most isn't the one people assume it is. Before we get into the content of this video, I want to note that all information in this video is for educational and entertainment purposes only and should not be considered financial advice. Always consult with a qualified professional before making any decisions regarding your money. Now, let's get into the video. My name is Emma, and I spend way too much time thinking about money and why women in particular get left out of or underserved by traditional financial advice. If any of this milestone breakdown ends up being useful for figuring out exactly where you stand, do me a favor and hit subscribe. It genuinely helps this channel keep making videos like this one instead of the generic, just budget better content that's everywhere else. Let's start with the number that matters more than any other on this list, and it's honestly not close. $1,000. Here's why this one is different from every milestone that comes after it. It's not about growth. It's not about compounding. It's about stopping something. Right now, more than a quarter of Americans, 27%, according to Bankrate's most recent annual emergency savings report, have absolutely zero emergency savings. Zero. Which means for over a quarter of the country, every single surprise expense becomes debt. Every one. The tire. The dentist appointment. The $200 copay. It all goes on a card, because there's nothing else for it to go on. And then next month there's a minimum payment sitting on top of everything else, and the month after that there's interest sitting on top of the minimum payment. That first $1,000 breaks that cycle. Not because $1,000 covers everything, it doesn't, and we'll get to that, but because it covers the small, frequent stuff that otherwise quietly drags you into debt $150 at a time. Take Maya. Maya's 26, works in marketing, brings home about $4,200 a month after taxes. Before she had that first $1,000 set aside, a flat tire meant a credit card swipe at 19% interest that took her 4 months to pay off, and by the time she'd finally paid it off, she'd handed the credit card company almost $30 extra in interest, for a repair that should have been a total non-event. After she had that $1,000 sitting in a separate account? Same flat tire. Same bill. But instead of a 4-month debt spiral, it was just a Tuesday. She paid it, closed the tab, and moved on with her week like nothing happened. Because, financially, nothing did. That's the real function of the first 1,000. It's not a safety net for catastrophe. It's a wall between you and the credit card. And here's the part that doesn't get talked about enough, that wall isn't just emotional, it's mathematical. Every time a surprise expense lands on a credit card instead of coming out of savings, you're not just paying for the expense. You're paying the expense plus whatever interest accrues while you chip away at it, plus the opportunity cost of however many months your budget is tied up making minimum payments instead of doing literally anything else with that money. $1,000 in a separate account isn't just $1,000. It's every future interest charge you never have to pay, stacking up in your favor instead of against you. Psychologically, this is the milestone that does the most work of any number on this list, because it's the first time your finances stop being purely reactive. You go from constantly bracing for the next surprise, that low hum of anxiety in the back of your mind every time your phone buzzes, to just having already handled it before it happened. But, and here's where it gets interesting, $1,000 is also where a lot of people accidentally stop. It feels like relief, so it starts to feel like enough. It's not. Because the next milestone is where the bigger surprises actually live, the ones that don't fit neatly into a Tuesday afternoon. $5,000. If 1,000 handles the flat tire, 5,000 handles the stuff that actually keeps people up at night, a job loss that takes 6 weeks instead of 2, a surprise medical bill after insurance decides it doesn't cover as much as you thought, a broken transmission instead of a flat tire. This is the range where inconvenience turns into crisis for most households, and it's also, statistically, where a huge number of Americans simply aren't. Only 46% of U.S. adults currently have enough savings to cover 3 months of expenses, according to Bankrate's 2026 data, meaning more than half the country is running without the exact cushion financial planners actually recommend, and living one bad month away from real trouble. For Maya, $5,000 was the number that let her stop taking every freelance side gig out of pure fear and start being genuinely picky about which ones she took. That's not a small thing. That's the difference between saying yes to a client because you're scared of a bounced payment next month, and saying no because the work simply isn't worth your time or your weekend. Money at this level doesn't just sit quietly in an account. It changes the tone of your decisions. It moves you from scarcity thinking into something closer to actual choice. There's also a quieter shift that happens around this number, one that has nothing to do with emergencies at all. $5,000 is usually the first time saving starts to feel less like restriction and more like momentum. Up until this point, a lot of people describe saving as something that happens to their spending. Money gets carved out, set aside, sacrificed. But somewhere around this range, it starts to feel like the account itself has weight, has direction. You start checking the balance not out of anxiety, but out of something closer to curiosity. That shift in how it feels to open your banking app is easy to overlook, but it's doing real work on how sustainable this whole habit turns out to be. $10,000. Here's a number that might genuinely surprise you. According to the Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finances, the median American household holds about $8,000 across all of their checking, savings, and money market accounts combined, while the average, pulled way up by a small number of very high-balance households, sits around $62,000. So if you've got $10,000 saved, you are, quite literally, ahead of the typical American household's entire liquid savings. Not behind. Ahead. I want to sit with that for a second, because so many of us walk around assuming everyone else has it more figured out than we do. They don't. The median, the number that represents a genuinely typical household, not one skewed upward by a handful of very wealthy families, is $8,000. If you're anywhere close to 10, you are doing better than half the country, full stop, no asterisk. What changes at 10,000 isn't just the math, it's the mental shift from surviving to planning. This is usually the point where people start asking themselves different questions. Not, how do I not go into debt this month, but should some of this actually be invested instead of sitting in a savings account earning almost nothing while inflation quietly eats at it? $10,000 is where the emergency fund conversation starts turning into the wealth-building conversation. And that shift in the questions you're asking is, honestly, more valuable long-term than the number itself. It's also, for a lot of women I've talked to, the first number that starts to feel like it belongs to them rather than just protecting them from disaster. Under 1,000, under 5,000, saving mostly feels defensive, you're building a wall against bad things happening. At 10,000, something starts to feel a little offensive instead, in the constructive sense of the word. You're not just protected anymore. you're building something. And that's a genuinely different emotional experience, even though the mechanics, moving money into an account every month, look identical from the outside. $50,000. This is where compounding stops being a vocabulary word from a finance textbook and starts being something you can actually feel in your own numbers. At $50,000, if a meaningful chunk of that is invested rather than sitting in cash, market growth alone can start adding thousands of dollars a year to your net worth, money you didn't work a single extra hour for. That's the moment saving and investing stop being the same activity in your head. Up until now, growth has come almost entirely from what you personally put in, paycheck by paycheck. From here forward, a real, measurable portion of it comes from what the money itself is doing while you're at work, at dinner, asleep, not thinking about it at all. This is also, honestly, where the identity shift gets real. Maya told me that around $50,000, she started thinking of herself differently, not as someone trying to save money, but as someone who simply has money. Not rich. Not done. But solid. And that identity shift changes behavior in ways the number alone doesn't fully explain. People at this stage tend to negotiate salaries more confidently, because a lowball offer doesn't feel like a threat anymore. They leave jobs that are quietly draining them, because they know they have room to breathe while they look for the next thing. The number creates options, the options create genuine confidence, and the confidence changes what you're willing to tolerate and what you're willing to walk away from. $100,000. There's an old saying in personal finance circles, the first 100,000 is the hardest. And the data backs that up more than you'd probably guess. According to the Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finances, the median retirement account balance across all American households is $87,000, while the average sits over $300,000, again, pulled way up by a small number of very large accounts skewing the picture. And among households that actually have retirement accounts at all, only about 9% have reached the $500,000 mark. Which tells you something important: six figures isn't some someday number reserved for people who make dramatically more than you do. It's a number a meaningful chunk of totally ordinary households eventually reach, slowly, and mostly through consistency rather than some dramatic income jump or lucky break. But here's the part that actually matters more than the dollar figure itself. At $100,000, the math starts working with you instead of just for you. Compounding on that base, even at a modest average return, can add tens of thousands of dollars over the following decade without you touching a single cent of it. And beyond the raw math, this is the milestone where real optionality shows up in your actual life. Taking a lower-paying job that you genuinely enjoy instead of one that just pays the most. Relocating for a partner, or simply for a better quality of life. Taking 6 months to figure out what's actually next instead of grabbing the first offer out of panic because you can't afford to wait. That's not about being rich. That's about no longer being trapped by the number in your bank account. If you zoom out across all 5 of these numbers, there's a pattern underneath the dollar figures that matters just as much as the figures themselves. At every single milestone, what's actually shifting is some combination of 3 things: your sense of safety, your sense of independence, and your confidence in your own decisions. At $1,000, safety shows up first, in the smallest, most immediate way. You stop bracing for the next small emergency. At $5,000 and $10,000, independence starts creeping in, the ability to say no to a bad client, a bad deal, a bad situation, simply because you're not desperate. And by $50,000 and $100,000, it's confidence that takes over, in negotiations, in career decisions, in your willingness to walk away from something that isn't serving you. None of that shows up on a bank statement. But it's the actual reason these numbers matter more than the math alone would suggest. Now, a cautionary turn, because I'd be doing you a disservice if I didn't mention this part. The milestones don't protect you automatically, and they never fully lock in. I've talked to women who hit $50,000, even $100,000, and then watched a good chunk of it quietly evaporate, not through some dramatic mistake or a single bad decision, but through slow, quiet lifestyle creep. A slightly nicer apartment here. A slightly nicer car there. Comparing themselves to people who look wealthier online and spending to close a gap that, if we're honest, was never really about money in the first place. The number on your account only protects you if your spending doesn't quietly climb right along with it. That's worth sitting with for a second, because it's the part of this journey nobody puts in the headline. Speaking of things that quietly reshape how you think about money, I want to tell you about a book that genuinely changed how I approach all of this, not in some vague read more finance books way, but in a specific, practical way. It's called I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Ramit Sethi. What it actually helped me do wasn't budget harder or feel more guilty about spending. It was set up an automated system where money moves itself into the right buckets, emergency fund, investments, guilt-free spending, before I ever get the chance to second-guess it in the moment. That one shift, automating the latter instead of white-knuckling it every single month, is honestly the difference between hitting these milestones by accident and hitting them on purpose. I've linked it below if you want to check it out. So here's where I actually want to leave you. If you're sitting there right now with nothing saved, or $500, or you're staring at that first $1,000 goal feeling like it's impossibly far away, you are not behind. You're not behind the friend who seems to have it all together, and you're definitely not behind some invisible standard you assume everyone else is quietly hitting. 27% of people have $0 saved right now, today. If you have anything at all, you are already doing something most of the country hasn't managed to do yet. These numbers aren't a ladder you either climb or fail at. They're checkpoints. Each one changes something specific and real about your actual life, your stress at midnight when the check engine light comes on, your ability to say no to work you don't want, your confidence walking into a salary negotiation, your freedom to leave something that isn't working for you anymore. You don't need all 5 milestones to feel different. You need the next one. Just the next one. So figure out which number you're closest to right now, and let that be the only one you're focused on. Not the person 3 milestones ahead of you on social media. Not the number that feels impossibly, hopelessly far away. Just the next one. That's how every single person who's ever actually gotten there did it, one number, then the next, until one day you look up and realize you're not the person lying awake over a check engine light anymore. And if you're wondering whether it's even worth starting when the number you're aiming for feels small, $50 a month, $100 a month, whatever fits right now, it is. Every single milestone on this list started at 0. Maya's first $1,000 started as $40 a paycheck, moved automatically, before she ever had the chance to spend it on something else. It didn't feel dramatic while it was happening. It rarely does. It just quietly adds up, month after month, until one day the number that used to feel impossible is just where you are now. That's the whole secret, if there even is one. Not intensity. Just consistency, applied to whichever number is next. I'm Emma, and I'll see you in the next one.